Hi there. Thanks for joining me here on Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I'm your host, Karen Fabian, the founder of Bare Bones Yoga and the creator of the Momentum Magic Method, the way to become a confident teacher, one who effortlessly walks around the room, shares clear cues, easily builds sequences, and speaks from your heart, sharing authentically with your students. Here on the podcast, you'll discover new and inspiring ways to share your cues and create your sequences. You'll uncover habits and frameworks all designed to empower you so that you can teach in a way that feels authentic and natural. For some episodes, I'll have a guest, and other episodes I'll share with you on my own, and in each one, you'll always get action steps and takeaways you can apply right away to your teaching. In addition to the podcast, follow me on Instagram and TikTok for daily videos. You'll see a link on both of my profiles, my Stan Store link. Click it and unlock ways you can get the support you need to be the teacher of your dreams. You'll find links to the podcast, my free ebook, and other resources to help you be the best teacher you can be. You'll also find the link to my signature program, the Yoga Anatomy Blueprint Learning Program, and you can see if you qualify to enroll. So with that, let's get on with today's show. Hi there, welcome to Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I'm your host, Karen Fabian, and this is episode 379. I am recording this on November 20th, 2025, and this will post on November 24th, 2025, the week of Thanksgiving. So I wanted to just start out, this is the season of gratitude, and I wanted to just start out saying I'm really grateful for you, the listener, for just listening to the show and just being part of this experience of me talking out into the void on this podcast. I mean, as I said, this is episode 379, so I've been at this for a while. And I love when I hear from people, that they say, oh, I'm listening to the show, or I caught your episode on teaching full time. And, this particular thing that you said really resonated with me. I absolutely, absolutely love that. So thank you so, so much for listening. I also wanted to say, here in Boston, it has definitely changed seasons. And I just wanted to share with you just a couple of they're related to wellness, but not related to teaching yoga, just thoughts on just overall health and wellness and things that I've been sort of inspired to experiment with going into this winter season, which for some reason, I don't know about you, but for some reason for me, it's just hitting particularly hard. I think it's just a combination of, I've lived in Boston for 40 years and I'm sort of tired of cold weather. But I love it here, and I do love the seasons. So I spent the past couple of weeks doing some research into Chinese medicine. I bought a couple books. I've started to watch a couple of different things on YouTube to really look to some techniques and wellness habits that come from Chinese medicine, which is so grounded in seasons and just eating and doing things, outside and, with our just general health habits that are connected to the seasons. And so I wanted to just share with you some of the things that I'm experimenting with as a way to kind of ease myself into winter. Because truth be told, as cold as it is here now, this is just the prelude. We're only in November. We pretty much have cold weather through, I don't know, like March, and we're not even at winter yet. So one of the things I did was, and this was recommended in this book I bought, is to buy a dry brush. And I will say it is uncomfortable, but it's supposed to get dead skin cells off your skin. So I basically stand in the shower before I take a shower. I use this dry brush and I brush the skin. I don't want to necessarily say documented evidence. I don't know. I haven't done a deep dive into the research around this from a scientific standpoint. But I think just, with my training in anatomy, when you look at the skin as an organ, it is the largest organ in the body. And that skin regenerates, and that When you brush the skin, you're going to bring, blood flow, in an increased way to the surface. That there are some health benefits that can come from this. So I will say go easy with it. Depending on the dry brush you buy, it can be a little uncomfortable. And, I'm basically just doing my arms and my legs. There are um, again, I don't want to say documents, but there are some articles out there that talk about the effect of dry brushing on the endocrine system. I'm sorry, the lymphatic system. And that's kind of interesting. So they talk about things like brushing up towards the heart, things like that. So I encourage you to check that out if you're interested. Another thing that I've been experimenting with, if you have a bathtub, is to take a bath with Epsom salts. And in my local grocery store, which is Wegmans, they have several different varieties of Epsom salts. And the one that I bought has magnesium in it, which is good for sleep. And it's kind of interesting to think about magnesium being administered via a bath. Obviously, the most common way people would take it is a supplement, a pill. And this is just an alternate way to dose it. And also the warm water has, good benefits for the body. It's also a great way to unwind after a long day. Depending on your situation, I don't have kids. I'm sure, if you're listening and you have a house full of kids or even one kid or a baby or something, it's probably really hard to say to your partner, "Hey, I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes in the bath," right? But if you do have time, if you can make time, it's something else you can experiment with. The other thing that I've been really finding has been helpful is, and this comes from Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, is warm foods over cold. I have noticed, I'm 61, I've noticed in the past year, maybe 2 years, but definitely the past year, I'm a little more sensitive to different things that I eat than before. And so I'm really playing around with what I eat, when I eat, how much I eat to just sort of see how that affects how I feel. And one of the things that's really helpful is to stick with more warm liquids, so tea, hot tea, I don't drink coffee, and to lean more towards warm foods, even for things like lunch, where I would typically have a salad, have a sandwich, like a usually like turkey and Swiss cheese sandwich. So I'm really swapping that out for maybe half a sandwich with soup or soup only with nuts and healthy crackers. Or maybe even like yesterday, I had tomato soup. I mean, this is probably so silly to be going into all this detail, but I had tomato soup with a half a bagel. So just something to think about when you think about your eating habits and the seasons and just experimenting with different things that might help you feel a little bit better. And there's a whole bunch of other things. Obviously, yoga, obviously, meditation. I walk the dog, so I get out. I think if you don't have a dog, it's just so important to get outside in the bright light as soon as possible when you wake up. That's an Andrew Huberman. He talks about this extensively on his podcast, Dr. Huberman. So you can definitely check that out on his website. His website is all indexed so you can find studies and scientific documentation to prove that morning sunlight is a great way from a circadian rhythm perspective to really reset your clock. And there's a lot of data behind that, but just make that part of your day as well. I know, here obviously it gets dark around 4:30. So when the sun is out, when the light is out, I am just trying to be out there as much as possible. So I wanted to start there and just share a little bit about, kind of what's going on behind the scenes. And the next thing I wanted to talk about was, when you talk about behind the scenes, a lot of what I've been doing of late is preparing for trainings I have coming up next year, where I'm going to be going in person to different places. And also, some of the trainings I've been doing now, which have been online. And I wanted to talk about this from the point of view of, sometimes when I host anatomy trainings, especially if they are part of somebody else's training, like a 200 hour or a 300 hour, you know, I think my teaching style and the content that I share and the way that I share it is just really unique and really different. And I know that because I hear that a lot from teachers. And one of the things that I hear, and I heard this again in a training I did this week, had to do with sort of a light bulb moment that some of the teachers were having. And this was in a 300-hour training. And when we were going through the agenda I had prepared, a number of the teachers were sort of having these epiphanies. They were saying, "Oh, wow, I'm realizing from your presentation here that I actually don't understand anatomy." And I sort of knew that, but I sort of didn't realize how much I didn't understand it until now. And this is a really common this is a really common experience that people have when I meet with them because I think I just have this ability to sort of peel back the layers on, do you understand the why behind the cues you're sharing? And it's not to do it in a way that's like a got you moment or to have the person feel badly about themselves. It's in a way to sort of wake you up from this kind of dream state you might be in, where you're in your classes saying different cues, saying different words, and not really understanding the why behind it. And it can be really subtle, like you can be asking people to engage your core. And if somebody asks you, well, what does engage mean or what core muscle applies here? You might realize, oh, geez, I'm just saying that phrase and I don't really know what I mean. And so this is, I recently started calling this being anatomy adjacent. And I didn't come up with the term fill in the blank hyphen adjacent or adjacent. It's kind of more used in media to talk about different topics. But here, I think the reference is apropos because when you're saying things in your classes that you can't explain, you're still saying them, right? And maybe they do make sense, but it's just that you're not exactly sure of the why behind it. And so you're sort of bumping up against being the kind of teacher who actually does understand anatomy, but you're not really there 100%. So that's the adjacent part. You're kind of leaning on the fence, but I want you to be able to bust through that fence and really own your knowledge. And, at the end of this particular training, I asked the teachers, we actually talked about this at the beginning and we talked about it at the end to kind of wrap things up and sort of end in more of a high vibe, energetic state. I said, what's going to be possible for you when you fill in this anatomy gap? And I think out of the 10 people or 8 people that were there, 2 or 3 of them said, I'm going to feel more confident. And that is by far the most common thing that teachers tell me. I'm going to feel so much more confident when I fill in this learning gap around anatomy. And the other thing I did, and I'll just mention this to you as well. So here's the thing. If you find, maybe you come to one of my trainings, maybe you're in my program, and you're having these revelations about, kind of what you don't know, it's not a problem. I mean, you're still teaching yoga. And that's what I really tried to pull everything back to for the conversation I was having with these teachers, because we don't want to say, oh, this means I'm bad, this means I'm not a good teacher. We want to just use it as information to direct us as to what is a good next step for us in our growth. And, honestly, that's why I make a lot of the videos I make in the way that I make them, because I want to sort of poke you a little bit and, or maybe even a lot in terms of, what do you know? What do you think you know? I mean, I did a video yesterday where I just did it outright as a quiz. And I asked the question and I said, I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to stop the video and see if you can answer it, and then restart the video and see if you got it right. So these sort of, I don't want to say confrontational, but these sort of confrontational, um, uh, this confrontational approach is to sort of wake you up out of this anatomy adjacent way of teaching into another way of transforming as a teacher so that you can feel like, I really know what I'm talking about here. I mean, that whole idea of I don't feel qualified, I don't feel expert enough, I don't feel like I know enough comes up a lot in terms of things I hear from teachers. And, there really is no way you'll ever know that you know enough. That's a mindset thing. However, there are some essentials of anatomy that I believe yoga teachers must know. And those are the kinds of things that I talk about. Obviously, those are things that are in my 10-step anatomy blueprint. Those are things I teach in my program. And that's, really where I believe yoga teachers should focus their learning when it comes to anatomy. So having said that, that's just kind of the intro. What I wanted to do today is I really crafted this episode with a particular teacher in mind. And it is a pretty niche conversation. So it might not apply to you. It might, and I'm not saying if it doesn't apply to you specifically, you're not going to get value out of it. Or maybe it was something you experienced as a newer teacher, and you can sort of listen from that frame of reference, like, oh, yeah, I had that experience too. So the conversation is really for someone who graduated from a 200-hour teacher training and isn't teaching. And they're not teaching because they don't feel like they're ready. And I was inspired to do this because I got an email from a teacher who falls into this category this week. And, she was just so positive in her emails. And at the same time, she was, telling me that she was really struggling to move forward. And I do hear this. I have heard this quite a bit over the years. And teachers can feel, and I'm saying teacher, even though the person hasn't started teaching yet, because the scenario is, the teacher has graduated from their 200-hour teacher training, but they haven't started teaching yet. And and so it is somebody that started teaching, or I'm sorry, it is someone that has completed a teacher training, they just haven't started teaching. And when I talk to people like this, a lot of times the thing that's really striking to me is they feel tremendous guilt. And the longer they wait from when they graduated from teacher training to when they start, if they start, the more guilt they feel. And oftentimes I'm talking to them before they've begun to teach. And they do feel tremendous guilt for having spent the money on the 200-hour, guilt for having taken time away from their family to do the training and not having, in their mind, followed through with actually using the training to teach yoga. So that's really who this conversation is directed for. And I want to speak to it from the point of view of, you know, somebody thinking, I'm just not ready. So the first thing that I want to offer you here is to just normalize the fear. You know, I can certainly say that I hear this a lot from people. So you're not the only person who is out there who's graduated from their 200-hour and is not teaching yet. There's something baked into being a yoga teacher that is another level of um, stepping out into the world than other types of fitness and movement professionals. There's something that's really commonly felt by yoga teachers around the fear of walking in the room and teaching yoga, teaching this particular practice. It's because, in my mind, it's a blend of not only teaching exercise, fitness, movement, it's also maybe literally speaking to yoga philosophy, or even if you're not literally speaking to it, you're teaching this practice that is steeped in this philosophical and historical um, approach to health. And baked into that concept is this perception that it's pressure filled. I have to do it in a certain way. I have to meet a certain expectation. And so that feeling like I have to do it a particular way, otherwise it's not good enough, creates this fear and this pressure to meet people's expectations creates fear. especially when people start to get granular on, well, what if I have teachers in the room? Or what if I have more experienced students in the room who've been practicing more than I have, or who have been taking class at this studio for a really long time, and now I'm this new teacher. Their expectation is going to be so high, I can't possibly meet that. I even remember a teacher said to me when I was doing an Instagram live, she commented, I don't think I can teach at a level that matches how much people are paying for the class. This sort of expectation that students need to get their quote unquote money's worth out of the class. And when I heard that, I thought, oh my God, that is another level of pressure that this person is putting on themselves, that is just an illustration of how far the mind will go sometimes to block you from doing something that you want to do, but it's creating this irrational set of fears around it. I mean, to go so far as to say, I don't think I can give them their money's worth because I'm a new teacher. It breaks my heart. But this is at the same time something I recognize as where the mind will go. If you've got something you're afraid of, the mind will go in all sorts of directions to hold that fear up unless you do something different to not so much take control back, although that's part of it, but unless you do something different to shift your focus. So the first thing is to just normalize the fear, to know that you're not alone in feeling this way. A lot of people feel this way when they graduate from a 200-hour training. Now, in terms of why this happens, we've talked a little bit about this, but just to kind of go a little deeper, this whole idea that I'm not good enough yet. And this feeling is proliferated by a lot of the stories that teachers tell, the words that teachers use, the narrative that's out there that you have to be teaching for a long time to be a really good qualified teacher. And that's just not true. What is a long time? Who defines what a long time is? We can go into so many different directions to disprove that just on the face of things logically, but logic and feelings don't always match. So I want you to just, you know, see if you can open your mind to seeing that there are so many different teachers out there with so many different levels of experience. And it's not enough to just look at how long somebody's been teaching as a way to validate them as a teacher. I've worked with lots of teachers who have enrolled in my program who have over 500 hours of training, and they're terrified when they go in to teach. They have a lot of these same feelings and they've been teaching for years. So the length of time that you've been teaching is no indicator of how good you are. The other thing is people worry about, I'm going to mess up. And mostly that's around the sequence. So I always say the best way to get around that fear is to use a signature sequence. If we look at it just in terms of learning, cognitive learning, neuroplasticity, neuroscience, how the brain works, if you use a similar sequence over and over again, it is a fact. It is a fact that you will get to know it better. And you'll get to know it to the point where you can teach it without worrying about messing up. And I know that the reason you're not going to want to do that is because you think there's something inherently bad or wrong with that, because of all the stories you've heard that teaching signature sequences, having that approach to teach the same sequence over and over again is boring, isn't going to give people their money's worth, isn't going to challenge their bodies. And all of that is just an untruth. You can go out there and disprove those beliefs yourself simply by trying it. Don't believe me. Use your own experience as a way to show yourself that your brain can learn the sequence if you just give your brain a chance to learn it. In any other context, you would totally agree that using the same thing, doing the same thing, driving the same way to work, driving the same car, learning how to drive on the same car, if you're an actor, learning your lines. If you have a corporate job and you're training somebody, you're training them in the same way about a particular task you want them to learn. Like if you have kids, you're showing them how to do things and you're having this routine around what you do with your kids to have them develop these patterns around learning and doing the things you want them to do. Like we have so much evidence in our daily lives that doing things over and over again, tying your shoes, I don't care, whatever it is, works. But then somehow we become yoga teachers and we have all these thoughts that, oh, well, the same thing isn't good enough. There are veritable yoga empires that have been based on the idea of teaching the same sequence over and over again. Baptiste, Core Power Yoga, Bikram Yoga, etc., etc. So don't believe me, go out there and see if it works for you. I pretty much can guarantee that it will. Another fear that comes up is I don't know enough anatomy. I don't know enough sequencing. I don't know how to cue yet. So let's just kind of knock those off one by one. The two main things you're going to be doing as a yoga teacher is saying your cues and teaching your sequence. We've already covered the sequencing part. You're going to use a signature sequence. Done. The next thing is, in regards to cueing, just use action cues. Step your foot forward, bring your feet together, reach your arms up, lean to the side, pull your belly button in, drop your back heel, step your foot wide, bend your knees, drop your hips, right? Just use short phrases that just speak to action. And that's it. Honestly, that's it. You have your signature sequence you're going to teach. You have your action cues you're going to share. What else is there? Obviously there are other things, but if we want a place to start from, that's what we're going to do. And then knowing that on top of it, we're going to have all sorts of feelings, all sorts of limiting beliefs, all sorts of experiences of wavering confidence, but we're going to just come back to those two essential things. The problem with so many people is that they don't get started because they're trying to do 15 or 20 things at once. And that just puts so much pressure on the teacher. So let's just simplify it. You're going to go in there with your signature sequence. At the beginning, that's going to feel new. And then as you teach it over and over again, you're going to get better and better at it. And then you're just going to use action cues. That's it. That is all you need to do to start. Now, the reality is at some point, you've got to realize that, not teaching isn't going to make you feel ready. Teaching is actually going to make you feel ready. And in your mind, if you continue to hear or listen to that part of the mind, which is saying, I'm not ready, I'm not ready, I'm not ready, you will never be ready because there is no end to all the things your mind is going to tell you you need to do to be ready. So part of getting started is appreciating that you're starting and not feeling ready at the same time. And that's natural. Think of the last thing you learned how to do, which was hard to do. You weren't ready to do it, but you did it. Again, I don't have kids, but I can imagine like sometimes people have kids and they're not really ready, or they plan to have kids and then the person's pregnant and they're realizing, oh my God, I'm not ready. Well, there's lots of things you do when you're not ready, and you still do them because you want to do them. And nobody is forcing you. Nobody forced you to go to a 200-hour teacher training. You did it because you want to. You wanted to be a yoga teacher. So instead of feeding that part of your mind that's telling you you're not ready, how about feeding that part of your mind that inspired you to go to 200-hour teacher training? That's the part of your mind you want to focus on. That saying, where your focus goes, your energy flows. So if you focus on all that messaging in your head that's telling you you're not ready, you're never going to feel ready. But if you start to listen to the part of your mind that inspired you to go in the first place, then you're going to be so jazzed up by all the things you're going to get to do, because now you graduated from a 200-hour teacher training and you've earned the right to start to teach. That's what's going to help you move forward. So focusing on that part is what's going to get you to move forward, even though you might not feel ready. Now, you know, what I just described is really a way to reframe the fear. If you've ever heard the saying, courage is the definition of being afraid of something, but doing it anyway. So reframing the fear is not to say the fear is gone and that feeling of not being ready is gone. It's appreciating that, hey, you know what? I'm not going to feel 100% ready. And I'm going to feel a little afraid. And at the same time, I am more focused on what's available to me, what's going to be available to me when I start teaching. And another approach you can take is to think less about how you're feeling and to think more about how you are going to help people feel. Now, we can't control what people feel, but we can sort of assume that on some baseline level, people are going to feel better after they took our class than before. They're coming to our class of their own choice, their own free will. They want to come to yoga. They appreciate yoga is good for you. Yoga helps them feel good about themselves, feel good in their body. And you're the person that's going to facilitate that feeling. And so you have a choice. Instead of focusing on how you feel, I feel nervous, I feel fearful, I feel like I'm going to mess up, flip the script and start to focus on your ability to be a change agent for the people who come to your class. And that sometimes can can kind of turn the volume down on some of the noise. Now, there's a couple of conversations I've had recently, and I think this one person I was talking about at the beginning talked about this too. There was a studio in her area, and she was in talks with them about teaching there, and they're kind of in a back and forth. So she's feeling a little stalled in regards to getting started because she's tied her ability to start teaching to this one location. And this is also really common. And I want you to really hear this. You are in charge. Nobody else is in charge of what you're doing. Teaching yoga is one of the few things that we can pretty much do anywhere, anytime, to anyone, offer it in lots of different ways, and no studio owns what you are able to do. You decide what you're able to do. So I don't want you ever to think that, let's say there's a particular studio you want to work at and they're giving you the runaround, or you've auditioned there and they've said, you know, you're not a good fit for our studio. Fine. There's lots of other things I can do. I don't want you ever to tie your hopes on teaching to one particular location. Nobody else is in charge of what you're doing. You decide. And that's part of being an empowered yoga teacher. So part of the picture here for somebody who hasn't started teaching yet is to start to think about what are ways that I can start to demonstrate my knowledge and love of teaching yoga right now that aren't necessarily tied to finding a gig, finding a job, getting out there. Yes, you need to do that. And there's also things you can be doing right now today. You could teach yoga to the person you live with. You could grab a couple of friends and teach yoga to them. You could set up a Zoom class and email that out to some friends that you have, email connections with, whether they're people that you know or people that you're connected with in other ways. You could start an Instagram page specifically for your yoga teaching expertise. And a really simple template is every video is how to do a pose. So there are so many different ways that you can get started that have nothing to do with waiting for somebody to get back to you, waiting for a job to open up. Now, in addition to that, of course, do some networking, look at studios in your area, put the word out to them, talk to the teacher training you went to. If it's a studio that's near you, see if you can sub for them. Talk to local community groups and, different fitness centers, see if they're interested. There's a lot of just business things you can do to find work. Indeed.com has lots of yoga jobs all the time. That's also a really good place to check. But even aside from all that, there are things that you can do right now today. You could go on YouTube and start posting videos, and the whole idea, if you're going to go into the social media world, is to have zero expectations. I've been on social media when the only platform that existed was Facebook and Twitter, a long time. And I have zero expectations around what's going to happen when I post a video. And I recommend you do the same. Like, don't think about it as how many likes, how many views, how many comments. Just put it out there, because honestly, when you do that, every time you make a video, you're teaching. And don't get hung up about, oh, well, I'm not in person, I'm not in a class, it's not the same thing. It is showing yourself, it is demonstrating your knowledge. And I don't care if you're doing that on a 3-minute Instagram video versus a 60-minute in-person class in a studio. It's all the same thing. And part of the challenge when you're at the point that you're at, which is you graduated from a teacher training and you haven't started teaching, is to start, is to show that part of your mind that's giving you these messages that you're not ready, that you know what? I don't care that you're telling me I'm not ready. I'm moving forward anyway because I'm in charge. You're not in charge, this part of my mind that's trying to drag me into negative energy. You are not in charge. I am the higher vibe person. I am in charge. And believe me, even something that is, in your mind, just a small step, starting an Instagram page and just making some videos, that will help you get going. That will help you start to dispel, start to turn the volume down on that negative voice. Now, I don't have to tell you this. I know you already know this, but there is a cost to not starting. Number one, there's the literal cost. There's the money you spent on the training. There's the time you spent on the training. You don't get that back if you don't use your training to be a teacher. But the more important thing is you wanted to teach. You went to teacher training to teach. So you owe it to yourself to go out there and start to teach, to see in real life if it is a match for you. Now, if you decide at some point you don't have the time to do it, you don't really like doing it, that's different because you're making that decision. I would be willing to bet, though, if you went into teacher training because on some level you knew you wanted to teach, when you start teaching, you are going to feel so fulfilled by teaching that you're going to look back at this time and you're going to say, man, I can't even believe I went through that. Now, let me just give you a little caveat, because sometimes people do start teaching and they realize about 6 months in, oh my God, I had no idea this was going to be that hard. And when I have conversations with them, they're spending hours every week writing out a new sequence. They're loaded down with all sorts of fears. They're loaded down with all sorts of perceived expectations from their students. So again, just all of what we're talking about here, signature sequencing, action cues, learning the fundamentals of anatomy, and I can certainly help you with that. Those things must be in place so that teaching feels easy and fun. Right now, though, what we're talking about is you haven't started teaching yet. You need a plan to get going, and that's what I wanted to cover in this episode here. So I want to wrap this one up, and I hope this was helpful. I would love to hear from you if this podcast episode is you. I would love to hear from you. If you have specific things that I didn't cover here today, please let me know, and I'll be happy to follow up with you via email and give you some custom one-on-one help. And the last thing I'll say is, you're listening to this, regardless of where you are in your teaching journey. If you are ready to finally learn anatomy, or if you are ready to once and for all learn anatomy so that you don't have to worry about it anymore and you can go into your classes and really feel confident teaching, go get your spot in the Yoga Anatomy Accelerator program. I've had so many great reviews from teachers in the program. I've added some more recent testimonials to the enrollment page so you can read the results that teachers are getting. And it's an opportunity for you to take that step forward into that transformation that you want, which is to be the kind of teacher who can really feel confident and make an impact in her classes. I will, in their classes, I will include the link to the Yoga Anatomy Accelerator in the show notes. You can also see it off the link on my Instagram page, and you can also see it on my website. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode. Namaste. Thanks for being here with me today. I hope you enjoyed the episode. And hey, one more thing. While I don't know you personally, I know what a yoga teacher looks like who's ready to have a breakthrough to being the kind of yoga teacher who walks around the room, sharing cues you know the reason for, understands anatomy, teaching signature sequences without notes or any need to practice with class, and loves teaching yoga without stress, anxiety, or nervousness. If you are ready to be that yoga teacher, here is your next step. DM me the words podcast offer, and I will give you a special incentive to work with me inside of my signature program just because you are listening to the podcast. DM me on Instagram at Bare Bones Yoga. I can't wait to hear from you.